Hi, I'm Cass. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my fall TBR video. My reading this year has been a little rough, but I am a firm believer that autumn will fix all of my problems. The second that the weather starts to cool down, even though I live in Florida and don't really have seasons, I just feel like I am just so much happier when everything is nice and cozy and orange, and I was gonna say the leaves are falling, but like, I live in Florida, it's fine. But reading in the fall is literally my favorite thing ever. And while I was putting together this TBR, I was just getting so excited about all the fall books I may potentially be picking up. I did pick 16, which is kind of a lot, especially since my 2025 TBR as a whole was 16 books. But it's fine, okay? Let me live in my delusion, because I need this. I'm going to go ahead and jump into talking about all 16 books that I have on my TBR, and then at the end of the video, I'll actually be putting together a fall TBR journal spread, which is very exciting because it will be featuring some washi tape that the washi tape shop sent me. And guys, they kind of popped off with their fall collection, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm very excited to show you that. Before I get into talking about the books though, as a little like PSA, these books aren't necessarily like all fall themed. I have some books that are very like fall-esque, some books I just want to read before the end of the year, and then some are just new releases I'm very excited about. I'm gonna go ahead and start talking about the first book though before I blather any longer, and that book is The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is a staple fantasy book. I feel like so many people absolutely adore this book. This book has been on my TBR since like 2022, and I put it on my 2025 TBR in hopes that I would get to it, and it hasn't happened. But I have heard phenomenal things about this book. It really is just like a staple in the fantasy genre, even though the series is unfinished and it's a whole thing. But I am a big fan of the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I know about series that are unfinished and how they are a whole thing. This series follows Locke and the Gentleman Bastards, who, from what I understand, are just like a thieving group. And it switches back and forth between past and present, kind of seeing flashbacks of how Locke was as a kid and how those things led to him being an adult and being in, I guess, the thieving business. I love a good heist plot, obviously like a very popular one being Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. So I'm excited to see that in an actual like adult fantasy novel versus YA and how they handle things. And I've heard the cast of characters are very well fleshed out and just very fun characters to read from and explore the city in, and it even has a map. And if you know anything about me, I love a good map. My copy does not have a map though, which is really disrespectful. But if I recall correctly, I believe the city is separated by these like water channels, and it's like separated into like little, not districts, but like sectors, I guess. And I'm really sad this doesn't have a map in it. If you don't know, I'm a fantasy cartographer, so I draw maps for books, and knowing that one edition has a map and this one doesn't kind of makes me a little sad. But mapless or not, I am very excited to dive into this. I will be making a reading vlog whenever I get around to reading this book because it has been on my TBR for quite some time. The only other like high fantasy book that I think was on my TBR for quite some time was Priory. And unfortunately I didn't love that one. So hopefully this one will be a banger and I can kind of kick myself for, you know, waiting so long to pick it up. The next book is actually a recent release, and that is Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. I wrote this down in my journal on my anticipated releases page and then promptly forgot about it until I was perusing a Barnes & Noble the other day and came across it, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen this Rebecca Ross book before. And it literally had come out like the week prior. I didn't end up buying a copy because I actually am not the biggest fan of the US editions, so I may cave and buy the UK edition. But this book follows Matilda, who is a goddess who has messenger magic, and in this world, gods are constantly fighting to steal power from others. So you have to kind of adapt, form alliances, and learn how to survive. Matilda carries letters and messages throughout the realms, but she has a secret, and that is a mortal boy dreamed of her. And then years later, when he's Lord of the River, he like completely forgot that he even like wrote a plea to Matilda. Matilda just comes tumbling through his door carrying a letter, which sounds so incredibly intriguing. I read lore by Alexander Bracken and really enjoyed like the god and moral and like the war going on in that book, and it's giving me similar vibes, so I'm very, very excited to pick up a copy and see what I think. Rebecca Ross always nails it with her storytelling and her prose and her characters. Every series that I've read by her, which is only 2 duologies, but still, every series I've read by her, I have felt so invested and connected to her characters, and I really hope that that Wild Reverence delivers these same feelings. Another recent-ish release that came out was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, and I am nervous for this book. I was very excited, obviously love me some R.F. Kuang, but there has been a lot of mixed reviews on this one. In this book, we are following two graduate students who are rescuing their professor's soul from hell before they can write a recommendation letter, I do believe. And honestly, in this economy, because a college education is expensive and it's honestly so rude that their professor ended up in hell before they graduated. So, I don't blame them, honestly. I have heard, like I said, very mixed things about this book. Some people say it reads like a textbook. Some people say that it is just R.F. Kuang trying to like brag about how smart she can sound. And honestly, in this household, we trust in R.F. Kuang. So even though I'm a little bit more hesitant to pick this up and a little bit more nervous, I will trust that R.F. Kuang has delivered a good novel. And this feels like such a perfect, like, quintessentially fall book. I mean, they're traveling into hell, like, hello. Ew, that sounds like a pun that I wasn't trying to make. There's spells and magic, and I assume demons because they're in hell, and I'm just very, very excited to pick this up. And this is another one that I will definitely be vlogging my experience about. The next book is an absolute classic fantasy novel that I still have not read. But last year I did end up reading The Hobbit and of course loved such a cute, cozy children's story. It was so fun. And this year I am going to try to dive into The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Obviously, I have seen the movies. I'm a huge fan of just like the world and how much Tolkien has affected just like the state of fantasy and how like years later people are still being influenced by him. And the fact that Tolkien also influenced like fantasy maps in books and is probably the reason that I even have a career in being a fantasy cartographer. I feel like I have to set aside time and finally dive into Tolkien's work, other than, of course, The Hobbit, which was really fun, by the way. Like I said, a very classic fantasy. I feel like I don't need to tell you what Lord of the Rings is about. They're taking the rings to Mordor to destroy the one ring that rules them all. So, fun times, I'm sure. I'm sure nothing goes wrong in this series. And also, big shout out to my Parvatai Katie for getting me these stunning editions of Lord of the Rings. I feel like I have to shout them out every time because they are impeccable, quite frankly. Okay, don't get too comfortable with me holding up the books because this is the last book that I actually own at this point, and then the rest will be like popped up on the screen. I've been trying to be better about my book buying / borrowing a lot of books from the library, so I have a hold on like most of the rest of the books I'm going to talk about. The new releases I will probably cave and buy a copy of, but I've been really good about my book buying this year. I think I've bought under 30 books, and it's September, which is kind of a big achievement for me, I'm not gonna lie. But the next book, and the last book that I own, is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. Katie, I swear, get out of my comment section right now. I already know you're typing. I have been saying I'm gonna pick up Oathbringer literally since I picked up Words of Radiance last year, and it's been like an every month ordeal where I'm like, this time I'm gonna set aside a week and read Oathbringer, and then it's like, okay, this time I'm gonna set aside a week and read Oathbringer. And then it doesn't happen. But in my defense, okay, it's a chunky book. Honestly, it's a little criminal at this point that I haven't finished the Stormlight Archives. I've literally drawn the map that I have like in my shop of Roshar, and yet I hadn't finished the series. And let me tell you, I made a mistake posting a TikTok about it because I was dodging spoilers so hard in my comment sections. I'm like, they're so right for assuming that I had read the entire series, but I haven't. I have only read 2 books. So diving back into the Stormlight Archives is something that will definitely happen this year. Even if I'm reeling it in at 11:59 on the last day of December, like it is going to happen this year. Mark my words. But if this doesn't age well, you never heard it from me. The next book is a romance book, and honestly, I don't tend to reach for that many romance books in the fall. I usually go on my big romance binge in the summer, but this summer I haven't hardly read any new romance books. So we're gonna change that by picking up If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia. This is a small town romance that takes place in Vermont, basically the fall place to be from my understanding. It takes place back in 1997 and follows 2 characters, one that moves to Vermont to take over her sister's B&B, and then the hot baker who lives next door. Now, I have heard that it gives very like Gilmore Girl vibes, I assume with like the atmosphere and it just being very fall-esque. I haven't seen Gilmore Girls because I couldn't make it past like the first 2 episodes because I found Rory really annoying and I couldn't get past that. I'm sorry. I hear from Gilmore Girl fans all the time that like, oh yeah, Rory is annoying, but like it's still good. I'm like, guys, she's one of the main characters. What do you mean you can't stand one of the main characters? Yet you push through all the seasons. I couldn't do it. But I have seen like clips, especially like when it is like, you know, set in the fall, and I'm like, that is stunning. I wish the characters weren't so insufferable, but it is stunning. I haven't read anything by Julie Olivia, so I'm very excited to see what I think of her romance, especially in this one. Although I did just see that it was 512 pages long, which is diabolical for a romance book, quite frankly, but it better be so good, and that page count better be due to just like pages worth of beautiful fall scenery descriptions, because that's a really long romance book, guys. I didn't realize it was 500 pages. This is also one of the newer releases that I definitely see myself caving and buying, because also the cover is adorable and just so autumnal. The next book also has such like an autumnal, like witchy vibe, and that is A Dark and Secret Magic by Wallace Kinney. This seems like the perfect book for October. I'm not super into anything like spooky or creepy. I'm not a big Halloween fan, although I have become a little bit of a Halloween fan by proxy because Katie is like a massive Halloween fan. So then I get hyped up for the holiday, like on behalf of her also being hype. So yeah, Halloween is just like a holiday that I'm like, yeah, Halloween, let's go, even though I don't really do anything for it, but I'm just excited that it's fall, you know? This book is giving like the most stereotypical yet best witchy vibes. She lives in a cozy cottage with a black cat and spends her days foraging herbs and just living her life in peaceful solitude, which honestly sounds so nice. I need peaceful solitude. And then drama starts happening in her coven while she's planning like a yearly like Halloween get together. And then a hot guy shows up as well that she's interacted with before and had like bad experiences with. So it's just like a whole cozy witchy vibe that I'm so excited to read. The bottom of the Goodreads description says, A Dark and Secret Magic is a celebration of the Halloween season and a love letter to anyone who drinks pumpkin spice in August and carries the spirit of a witch inside their hearts all year long. And I think that is so fun. And while I'm not like the biggest fan of like witchy stories, at least not the ones that I've read, I'm hoping that this one will deliver for me. The next book is by Jen DeLuca, who wrote the Renaissance romance series that I adore so much, and that is Haunted Ever After. I have the most mixed feelings about this book for so many reasons, and I haven't even picked it up. Like I said, Jen DeLuca wrote the Ren Fair romance series that just like lives rent-free in my mind, that I have read over and over and over and over again. And the romances in that book are so fun, and the setting is really what sells it for me. Now, this book takes place in Florida, which is where I currently reside and where I would love to not reside, and therefore I'm just not sure how I feel about a book set in Florida. I feel like it's not necessarily the most seasonal vibes for like a haunted, like spooky romance book, but I think Jen DeLuca did that on purpose. I think it is kind of like a love letter to Florida from her. Anyways, Florida aside, we are following 2 characters, one who recently moved to the small town of Boneyard Key, which is adorable, and bought a historical cottage that probably is haunted. And then there's the owner of a coffee shop who leans a lot into the like ghost stories for like tourism purposes, but Cassie, who moved into this like haunted house probably, is starting to believe that it may actually be haunted from like the cryptic letters she's getting and all sorts. It sounds like something I might enjoy, but also sounds like something that I might not enjoy. But it is Jen DeLuca and I want to give it a shot, and I meant to read it last year, but I completely forgot about it, if we're being so honest. But she recently published the second book and it just like brought back the fact that like, oh yeah, it's the spooky season. October feels like the perfect time to read this, so definitely on the TBR. The next book's comp titles are literally stunning. It's Final Fantasy meets Shadow and Bone. Stellar. Now, am I a gamer? No. Do I like the aesthetic of Final Fantasy? Yes. Have I beaten a Final Fantasy game? No, but I am playing one from 2002 called Crystal Chronicles with my brother, and we both suck at the game and are stuck. But it's fine, because I love the music and the vibes and the aesthetic. So, The Floating Worlds by Axio sounds like something that would be up my alley. I haven't read anything by Axio other than like her K-pop books, which are phenomenal and super cute. I think this book will have one of like my all-time favorite fantasy. I don't know if it's like a trope or if it's just like a thing that some fantasy books do where you're following like two different like character POVs. I think you get both POVs. And then they finally overlap, and when they overlap, that is my favorite moment ever. And it's an adventure about demons, and apparently one of the main characters is being hunted and the other person like doesn't know that like that's the person they're supposed to be hunting. I just think it'll be very interesting to dive into Axie Oh's fantasy works. Like I said, I've only read her K-pop books, but I've heard good things about it. I'm very excited to pick it up, and the cover is stunning. So will I be caving and buying a copy? Yes. The next book is actually the 9th book in the Veronica Speedwell series, which is A Grave Robbery. Have I read book 8? No, but I'm hoping that I will soon-ish. I have been like following along with Katie's speed read-a-thon situation happening, where every month her and her patrons read one of the Veronica Speedwell books, and then every like quarter I think they discuss it together. And did I not start this until July? Yes, but I have had just a blast following along Veronica and Stoker. Their wonderful banter-filled, sarcasm-filled relationship and following along the mysteries that they solve. It has been a delightful time, and book 9 is the last book that is released, and then book 10 comes out in March. January or March? It's one of the 2 months. I don't remember. But my goal is to, finish the series off before the end of the year, which is basically hopefully in fall. So I thought I'd go ahead and throw it on my TBR because this seems like a highly likely book that I will finish, and I want to feel at least like semi-accomplished when it comes to like completing my TBR this fall. So, funny story about the next book, which is Ship of Spells by H. Layton Dixon. The only reason I added this to my TBR is because I saw the words sentient ship, and I was sold. You guys know how I feel about ships, let alone a sentient one. I feel like this has potential. I don't know much about this book because the blurb really doesn't give much, except for saying a shipwrecked royal mage wants to join an infamous band of pirates, and she has to prove herself to the infuriating captain of the ship in order to join, and also, win over the sentient ship, which seems like it'd be right up my alley, and I'm so excited to pick this one up. I have seen literally nothing about this book. It literally comes out in November, but there are no reviews. But once again, the comp titles are cracking me up. Because tell me why this is One Piece meets Shadow and Bone. And also, why are so many books compared to Shadow and Bone? Like, I guess it is like a mega popular like YA fantasy series, which is, it is a good series, but it's also so funny that like out of the 2 comp titles that I thought were really funny and wanted to share with you, like they both involve Shadow and Bone. But One Piece meets Shadow and Bone? Kind of stellar. Now, have I watched much of One Piece? No, I've watched like 9 episodes, but I loved it, okay? But I can't even commit to an anime that's like 20 episodes long, let alone over 1,000 episodes long. Don't fight me on this. You're not gonna win the One Piece battle with me, okay? Get back to me when it's completed and they figure out what the One Piece is and they find it, and then maybe we'll talk. The next book is another upcoming release that also comes out the 4th of November, which is funny because I didn't realize that, and now I'm talking about 2 books that come out the 4th of November, back to back. But this is Fallen City by Adrienne Young. I read Fable by her, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of the book series, the problem didn't lie in the writing, because I actually really enjoyed the writing. The problem was the characters and the lack of disconnect I felt with them. So I'm hoping that this book will have better characters and still an absolutely stellar story. It's a very like classic story arc of like political turmoil, a revolution, like 2 characters coming together to hopefully overthrow the corruptness of whoever is in charge situation. But I'm hoping Adrienne Young will deliver a story more interesting than the US cover, because what is this? I'm so sorry. No, I'm not. What is this? Genuinely, why? The UK cover? Beautiful. But the US cover, what are we doing here? Anyways, moving on. I actually have another Adrienne Young book on my TBR, which I want to briefly discuss because I haven't actually read the blurb in a while, because I remember so vividly people telling me go into this book knowing hardly anything, and that is The Unmaking of June Farrow. This is actually on my 2025 TBR as a whole, so I decided to plop it on my fall TBR as well in hopes that, could get like bonus points for having like 2 check marks off of my TBR. Will it happen? I don't know. But I've heard phenomenal things about this. Like, people really love this book. It's got like a 4.13 rating on Goodreads with over 167,000 ratings. And a 4.0 with like that many ratings is, I feel like, hard to come by. So I'm so excited to dive into this. Like I said, I have no idea what's about. No one tell me what's it about, but just letting you know it is on my TBR. The next book is actually an indie pub book that I saw the cover on Instagram and I was like, okay, I need that. What is this book about? And then I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, I need to read that book. And that is The Ballad of the Last Dragon by C.A. Farron. Our main character is an elf, and apparently in this world, like, I guess people aren't a big fan of elves, but she wants to make a name for herself regardless and become a famous, world-renowned bard. But she is off the beaten path at like a local tavern where not much excitement happens. But then a group of adventurers arrive who are trying to slay a dragon, and Syl convinces them that they need a bard because they need someone to, you know, sing all their glory when they kill the dragon. And then it follows, I assume, her adventures throughout, I guess, the party, you know, slaying the dragon, and, you know, hopefully things ending well. Like I said, the cover alone is phenomenal, but the story also is so exciting because I love me a bard character, and the only other bard character that I've read from was Kvothe. And I know people have their mixed feelings about Kvothe from The Name of the Wind, but I adore his character, even though he really is like, oh, there's the word where it's like, he's just like good at everything and like so perfect and all of this and just like smarter than everybody. He's like one of those characters. But unfortunately, I adore him even though he is completely insufferable. So hopefully Syl is maybe not that insufferable, and I'm just really excited to read about another bard character and like own a copy of this stellar cover because hello. The last and final book on my TBR for fall is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. Y'all know that I read Founderside last year and absolutely ate it up, and honestly I should have just like put the second book on the series on my TBR instead of like trying to start a new series by him. Come to think of it, because I love Founderside, the fact that I haven't finished the series is kind of crazy. But it's fine. There's a lot of strange magic and two characters come together to kind of solve a mystery going on. It's compared to a very like Watson and Holmes like partnership. I don't dive into a lot of mystery books. The Veronica Speedwell series is like as far as I'll go, and like even those books, like, yes, the main plot is mystery, but let's be honest, we're all in it for Veronica and Stoker. But people are saying this is very like classic mystery fantasy, and I'm just really curious to see like where this book leads to, what I think about it, and then maybe it'll inspire me to finish the rest of Founderside. Who knows? That wraps up the TBR portion of this video, and now for the moment you probably all have been waiting for, which is my journal page. I am so excited about, because if there's one thing I also love about fall, it is fall journaling, because the aesthetic of the washi tape and the stickers and the colors and just everything about it, and also like these covers put together, surely they have to look phenomenal because so many of them give such fall vibes, and I'm so excited to put it together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and put together my fall TBR spread. enjoyed seeing me put together my fall TBR spread, and a big shout out once again to the washi tape shop for sending me these washi tapes to use in my journal. I think they look stellar, and also just to show off my journal one more time, this is from Creeping Moon on Etsy. Guys, it's also giving such fall vibes, and I'm so here for it. I hope that this video helps you transition into fall, maybe get some ideas for your fall TBR. Let me know if you have any very like autumnal books that you have on your TBR. I'd love to know, and add to my own, because a perpetual TBR is in fact inevitable. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my next one. Toodles!